Commander Zixthala pressed her long blue fingers against the smooth surface of her datapad. The report showed the same results it had shown for the past 50 cycles. The small blue planet called Sol 3 by its inhabitants remained at low threat. Level 2. She shook her head and made a small clicking sound with her throat. After all these years of watching, the humans still seemed so simple. The evaluation was clear. The creatures on this world used chemical rockets to move through space. Their fastest ships took months just to reach their own moon. They had split their planet into hundreds of different groups that fought each other constantly. They could not even agree on how to measure time or distance. Most importantly, they had never left their home planet to live anywhere else. By every standard the Galactic Assessment Council used, these humans were nothing to worry about. Zixthala looked at the numbers again. Chemical propulsion rated a 2 out of 10. Political unity scored a 1 out of 10. Expansion capability was 0 out of 10. Military threat came in at 3 out of 10, and only because they had weapons that could destroy their own planet. The overall rating was low threat level 2, the same as most primitive species that had just discovered fire. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Peter Grant rubbed his tired eyes and looked at his computer screen. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but he did not notice. For the past 6 months he had been tracking strange energy readings from the edge of the solar system. The patterns were too regular to be natural, but too complex to be equipment problems. Peter worked alone in the International Space Monitoring Station in Colorado. The building sat on top of a mountain, far from city lights and radio signals. Most nights he was the only person there. His job was to watch for asteroids and solar storms, but these readings were different. They appeared every few days, always in the same area of space, always with the same energy signature. He had shown the data to his colleague Maria Santos 3 weeks ago. She had looked at the numbers for less than 5 minutes before dismissing them as computer errors. The equipment was old, she said. The readings were probably caused by interference from Earth satellites. Peter knew she was wrong, but he could not prove it yet. The truth was that something had been watching Earth for a very long time. High above the solar system, invisible to human telescopes, a network of monitoring stations recorded everything that happened on the blue planet. They tracked every rocket launch, every nuclear test, every military exercise. They listened to radio signals and television broadcasts. They watched and waited and reported back to the Galactic Assessment Council. The Watchers had been doing this job for thousands of years. They were very good at it. They could predict how most species would develop. They knew which planets would become threats and which would remain harmless. They had categories for everything. Type A species that developed too fast, Type B species that unified too early, Type C species that expanded too quickly. Each type had its own management protocol. Humans fit none of these categories perfectly, which made them easy to classify as low threat. They were developing technology at a normal pace. They were fighting among themselves instead of unifying. They showed no signs of wanting to expand beyond their home planet. Everything about them suggested they would remain contained and manageable for centuries to come. But the classification system had one major flaw. It measured what species had accomplished, not what they were capable of accomplishing. It looked at current behavior, not potential behavior. It assumed that the way a species acted during peacetime was the same way they would act when facing extinction. The Galactic Assessment Council had been using this system for thousands of years without problems. Every species they had encountered fit neatly into one of their categories. Aggressive species stayed aggressive. Peaceful species stayed peaceful. Primitive species stayed primitive until they slowly developed into something more advanced. The system worked because most species were predictable. Humans were not predictable. Back on Earth, Peter Grant made a discovery that would change everything. While analyzing the mysterious energy readings, he found a pattern hidden in the static. The signals were not random. They were not equipment failures. They were transmissions, sent from multiple points around the solar system, all directed toward the same area of deep space. Peter printed out the data and spread the papers across his desk. He drew lines connecting the transmission points and calculated the angles. Every signal was aimed at a point roughly 40 astronomical units from Earth. in the direction of the constellation Perseus. Something out there was receiving regular reports about Earth. He reached for his phone to call Maria, then stopped. She would not believe him. She would say he was seeing patterns that did not exist. She would blame the old equipment again. Peter needed more proof before he could convince anyone that Earth was being watched. Meanwhile, Commander Zixathala finished her monthly report and sent it to the Galactic Assessment Council. The report was routine, identical to dozens of others she had filed over the years. Humans remained at low threat level 2. No changes in technology, no changes in behavior, no changes in expansion capability. The blue planet could safely be ignored for another cycle. The report traveled through subspace communication networks to the Council headquarters on Kepler Prime. There, it was filed with thousands of other routine assessments from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. A junior analyst glanced at the summary, noted the unchanged threat level, and moved on to more important matters. Nobody questioned the classification. Nobody wondered if the assessment criteria might be incomplete. Nobody considered that a species, rated as low threat, might be capable of becoming something much more dangerous under the right circumstances. The humans continued their daily lives, unaware that they were being watched and evaluated. They went to work, raised their families, and fought their small wars. They launched their slow rockets and conducted their primitive science experiments. They behaved exactly as the Galactic Assessment Council expected them to behave. Dr. Peter Grant continued tracking the mysterious signals. Each night he gathered more data. Each morning he analyzed the patterns. Slowly he began to understand that the signals were part of a larger surveillance network. Earth was not just being watched occasionally. It was being monitored constantly by multiple stations using technology far beyond human understanding. The irony was perfect. While humans were being classified as harmless primitives, one of those primitives was discovering the classification system itself. While the Galactic Assessment Council congratulated itself on another successful evaluation, a human scientist was preparing to prove that their entire understanding of his species was wrong. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. On one side stood an ancient civilization that had perfected the art of managing primitive species. On the other side stood a young species that had never learned to accept limitations. Neither side understood what they were about to face. The aliens had classified humans as low threat because they measured the wrong things. The humans had no idea they were about to be tested in ways they could never imagine. The universe was about to learn why underestimating humanity was the most dangerous mistake any species could make. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the research vessel Aurora, watching the stars through the main view screen. She had been in space for 3 months, leading a mission to study solar radiation patterns near Jupiter. It was routine work, the kind that kept her crew busy but not excited. That changed at 1432 ship time when the largest object any human had ever seen appeared directly in front of them. The alien ship was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. It stretched for miles in every direction, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Lights moved along its hull in complex designs that suggested intelligence far beyond human understanding. The Aurora, which had seemed large and impressive when it left Earth orbit, now looked like a toy boat next to an aircraft carrier. Lisa's communications officer, Lieutenant Danny Walsh, turned from his station with wide eyes. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming through on multiple frequencies at once, and somehow we can understand every word." The voice that filled the bridge was calm and pleasant, like a teacher speaking to young children. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of Sol 3. We are the Hegemony Collective. Your world has been designated for resource extraction. You will be relocated to preserve your species. This is not a request. Prepare your planet for orderly transition." Lisa felt her heart hammering in her chest, but her voice stayed steady. Years of training had prepared her for emergency situations, though nothing had prepared her for this. "This is Captain Lisa Hayes of the Earth vessel Aurora. We request immediate communication with your command structure to discuss terms." There was a pause, then something that might have been alien laughter. "Terms? You misunderstand your situation. We will arrive at your planet in 30 of your days. Your leaders will be contacted with relocation instructions. Comply, and your species will survive. Resist, and you will be managed through alternative methods. The transmission ended. The massive alien ship vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving no trace except for readings on the Aurora's sensors that proved it had been real. Lisa stood in the sudden silence, knowing that everything had just changed forever. On the alien ship, Sub-Commander Veltar reviewed the encounter report with satisfaction. The human reaction had been exactly what the protocols predicted. Initial shock, followed by attempts to negotiate, followed by acceptance of superior force. The humans had even used the word terms, which showed they understood they were in no position to make demands. Veltar had conducted first contact with 47 primitive species over his long career. The pattern was always the same: shock, negotiation attempts, then submission. Sometimes a species would try to fight, but their primitive weapons were never a real threat. The humans would follow the same path as all the others. The Aurora raced back toward Earth at maximum speed, but even with their fastest engines, the journey would take weeks. Lisa spent every waking moment preparing reports and recommendations for Earth's leaders. She knew that 30 days was not much time to prepare for the end of civilization as humans knew it. On Earth, the message from the Aurora reached government leaders within hours. President Helen Carter sat in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by generals, scientists, and intelligence officials. The recording of the alien transmission played 3 times before anyone spoke. General Frank Morrison was the first to break the silence. He was a man who had spent his entire career preparing for impossible situations. His voice was calm and professional. "Ma'am, we need to assume this is real and act accordingly. If we have 30 days, we need to use every minute." Ambassador Kate Thompson, the State Department's specialist in crisis negotiation, nodded in agreement. "We need to establish formal contact immediately. If they're willing to talk, we might be able to negotiate better terms for relocation." What neither the general nor the ambassador said out loud was what everyone in the room was thinking. Humanity had been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Every military strategist had studied invasion scenarios. Every scientist had theorized about contact with advanced civilizations. Every government had plans for situations that seemed impossible. The aliens expected panic, chaos, and eventual surrender. Instead, they were about to encounter the most dangerous thing in the universe: organized human paranoia backed by institutional planning. Dr. Alan Foster received the call at his home in Maryland at 3 in the morning. He was America's leading expert in cryptography and communication theory, and he was being asked to come to Washington immediately to work on the most important project in human history. By dawn, he was sitting in a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, analyzing every second of the alien transmission. Working with him was Dr. Jennifer Cole, a linguist who spoke 12 human languages and had spent her career studying how different cultures communicated complex ideas. Together, they began the process of understanding not just what the aliens had said, but how they thought. The breakthrough came on the 3rd day. While diplomats prepared for formal contact and military leaders drew up defense plans, Alan and Jennifer discovered something crucial about alien communication patterns. The aliens were not just translating their words into human language. They were translating their concepts into human thinking patterns. This meant the aliens understood human psychology well enough to communicate in ways humans would find natural. But it also meant they were revealing how their own minds worked. Every word choice, every pause, every inflection provided clues about alien thought processes. The formal contact came exactly 1 week after the Aurora encounter. The alien ship appeared in Earth orbit, visible to the naked eye as a bright star that moved slowly across the sky. Sub-Commander Veltar and a small delegation transported down to a meeting site in neutral Switzerland. Veltar expected to meet with frightened primitives who would beg for mercy and ask for more time. Instead, he found himself in a conference room with General Morrison and Ambassador Thompson, both of whom treated the meeting like a business negotiation. General Morrison spoke first. "Sub-Commander Veltar, we appreciate your directness regarding your intentions. We have several questions about the relocation process that will help us prepare our population for orderly transition. Felter was surprised by the calm response, but he attributed it to shock. Primitives often reacted strangely when faced with concepts beyond their understanding. He activated his translation device and began explaining the standard relocation protocol. Ambassador Thompson took careful notes and asked detailed questions. How many humans would be relocated? Where would they be taken? What resources would be provided? What would happen to Earth after the extraction? Her questions were precise and practical, showing no signs of the emotional breakdown Veltar expected. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, Veltar felt oddly unsettled. The humans were behaving exactly as the protocols predicted, but something felt wrong. They were too calm, too organized, too prepared. Most primitive species spent weeks in denial before accepting their situation. These humans seemed to have moved directly to practical planning. After the aliens left, General Morrison and Ambassador Thompson walked to a secure communication room. They activated encrypted channels to every major government on Earth. The message was simple. Formal contact had been established, terms had been discussed, and humanity had 30 days to prepare. What they did not tell the aliens was that preparation had already begun. Within hours of the Aurora's first message, every major nation had activated classified protocols that had been developed over decades of hypothetical planning. The Russians had begun moving their most advanced weapons to secure locations. The Chinese had started converting factories to produce items from theoretical specifications. The Americans had activated communication networks that could survive global catastrophe. The aliens saw a primitive species accepting its fate. What they failed to see was a species that had spent generations preparing for every possible threat, including ones they had never encountered before. Humanity's greatest weakness, their tendency to plan for disasters that might never happen, was about to become their greatest strength. Sub-Commander Veltar filed his report with confidence. The humans were reacting exactly as expected. The Kai. Relocation would proceed smoothly, just like the 47 that had come before. He had no idea that he had just made first contact with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. 3 days after first contact, something happened that had never occurred in recorded human history. Every major leader on Earth agreed on the same plan. President Helen Carter stood in the Oval Office, speaking on a secure video conference, with Premier Liu Wei of China, President Viktor Petrov of Russia, Chancellor Maria Schmidt of Germany, and 12 other world leaders. "We all understand the situation," President Carter said. "We have 27 days to prepare for something that should be impossible to prepare for. Our survival depends on complete cooperation." Premier Liu Wei nodded from his screen in Beijing. "China will provide all manufacturing capacity. Every factory that can be converted will begin producing materials from the specifications your scientists provide." President Petrov spoke from Moscow. "Russia offers all nuclear technology and our space launch capabilities. We also have deep shelters that can protect key personnel." What was happening had never been seen before in galactic history. A primitive species was unifying completely while keeping their individual strengths. Usually, when threatened species tried to work together, they spent most of their time arguing about leadership and resources. Humans were doing the opposite. They were combining their abilities without wasting time on politics. Colonel Jake Murphy had been chosen to lead the Terran Defense Initiative from a command center carved deep into a mountain in Switzerland. The facility had been built in secret, over 15 years as part of a theoretical alien invasion response plan. Jake had thought the plan was a waste of money. Now he was grateful that someone had been paranoid enough to build it. Working beside him was Dr. Rebecca Chang, whose team had been given the impossible task of creating human weapons that could fight alien technology. She had been awake for 60 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. Her computer screens showed designs that mixed human engineering with principles reverse-engineered from the alien ship's energy readings. "Jake, look at this," Rebecca said, pointing to a design on her main screen. "The alien ship's power signature shows they use controlled gravitational fields for propulsion. If we can generate the same type of field, We can build weapons that use their own technology against them. Jake studied the design. It looked like a missile crossed with a particle accelerator, built around a power source that did not exist yet. How long to build a prototype? Give me the materials in 72 hours, Rebecca replied. Around the world, similar conversations were taking place in dozens of languages. In Japan, engineers were designing new spacecraft using alien propulsion theory. In Israel, weapons, experts were creating targeting systems that could track objects moving faster than light. In Brazil, computer programmers were writing software that could process information at speeds no human had ever imagined. The aliens watched all of this activity with growing confusion. Their monitoring stations recorded massive increases in energy usage, industrial production, and global communications. Sub-Commander Veltar received reports every few hours that showed human activity increasing beyond normal levels. He discussed the reports with his senior staff during their daily briefing. The humans appear to be experiencing what their psychology profiles describe as panic response, when he said, "Their industrial activity has increased by 400%. They are moving resources and personnel at unprecedented rates." Science Officer Kethron consulted her datapad. This behavior matches historical patterns from other primitive species facing relocation. Increased activity, resource hoarding, and frantic communication are normal responses to existential threat. Veltar felt reassured. The humans were behaving exactly as expected. Their increased activity was evidence of panic, not preparation. Primitive species always tried to build defenses they could never use effectively. The humans would exhaust themselves with useless effort and be even easier to manage when the time came. But something was wrong with this analysis. Other primitive species had increased their activity, but never in organized ways. They built walls that could not be defended, weapons that could not be operated, and shelters that could not be supplied. The humans were different. Every increase in activity seemed planned and coordinated. Dr. Rebecca Chang's team achieved their first breakthrough on day 18. They successfully created a small gravitational field generator using principles copied from alien technology. The device was crude compared to alien engineering, but it worked. More importantly, it proved that human scientists could understand and duplicate alien technology given enough time and resources. The breakthrough came at a perfect moment. Jake Murphy had been coordinating with military leaders worldwide to organize humanity's defense. They had weapons, but no way to deliver them effectively. Human rockets were too slow to catch alien ships. Human aircraft could not operate in space. The gravitational field generator changed everything. Within 6 hours of Rebecca's success, her designs were transmitted to manufacturing centers on every continent. The Chinese began mass-producing field generators in factories that had been making automobiles the week before. The Germans started building targeting systems in plants that had been producing industrial equipment. The Americans converted missile production lines to create delivery systems for weapons that had never existed before. The coordination was perfect, and that should have been impossible. Throughout human history, nations had competed with each other even when facing common threats. Cooperation had always been limited by politics, economics, and cultural differences. But the alien threat was so complete that these normal barriers became irrelevant. Commander Zixthala, monitoring the situation from her station at the edge of the solar system, began to feel the first real concern she had experienced in decades of observation. The energy readings from Earth were unlike anything in her database of primitive species responses. The humans were not just panic-building random defenses. They were creating integrated systems that worked together across their entire planet. She reviewed the classification protocols again, looking for explanations. Primitive species were supposed to become less organized under extreme threat, not more organized. They were supposed to fragment into competing groups, not unify into a single, coordinated response. The humans were violating every prediction the Galactic Assessment Council had ever made about primitive behavior. Dr. Alan Foster made the second major breakthrough on day 22. While studying alien communication patterns, he discovered that their transmission methods revealed the locations of their monitoring stations. The aliens had been so confident in their invisibility that they had not bothered to hide their signals from anyone smart enough to detect them. Alan's discovery meant humanity could see the alien surveillance network. More importantly, it meant they could target it. Jake Murphy received the information and immediately began planning the most audacious military operation in human history. The plan was simple in concept, but staggering in complexity. On day 29, one day before the alien deadline, humanity would simultaneously attack every monitoring station in the solar system. The attack would use gravitational weapons launched from hidden bases on Earth, coordinated with strikes from converted civilian spacecraft that had been secretly armed with human-alien hybrid technology. The goal was not to destroy the alien fleet, which was probably impossible. The goal was to prove that humanity could not be managed like other primitive species. They would show the aliens that humans were capable of detecting, analyzing, and striking back against threats they had supposedly never encountered before. As day 28 arrived, human activity reached levels that the alien monitoring stations could not explain using their existing models of primitive behavior. Electromagnetic signatures suggested that entire continents were being converted into weapons production centers. Communication traffic indicated coordination between groups that had never cooperated before. Energy usage showed industrial capacity being pushed beyond theoretical limits. Sub-Commander Veltar received a priority message from Galactic Command ordering him to explain the unusual readings. He stared at his data screens, trying to find words to describe what he was seeing. The humans were preparing for war, but not in any way that made sense according to established primitive warfare patterns. They were not building traditional defenses. They were not hiding in underground shelters. They were not attempting to negotiate for better terms. Instead, they were doing something that no primitive species had ever done before. They were preparing to fight back using the attacker's own technology. The next day would bring the most shocking event in galactic history. For the first time in thousands of years, a primitive species classified as low threat would successfully strike back against the galactic assessment system itself. Day 28 arrived with clear skies over most of Earth. In the command center beneath the Swiss mountains, Colonel Jake Murphy stood before a wall of screens showing the positions of human forces around the solar system. Ships that had been civilian research vessels a month ago now carried weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Satellites that had been used for weather monitoring now targeted alien surveillance stations millions of miles away. Dr. Rebecca Chang sat at her control station, her fingers dancing across keyboards that controlled systems she had invented 3 weeks ago. Her gravitational weapons existed only because humans had done something the aliens thought was impossible. They had learned alien technology faster than the aliens thought any primitive species could learn. "All stations report ready," announced Lieutenant Sarah Brooks from the communications center. "We have confirmation from 37 attack positions. Weapons are charged and targets are locked." Jake looked at the countdown clock on his main screen. 6 hours and 14 minutes until the alien deadline. The aliens expected humanity to surrender today. Instead, they were about to discover that they had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Captain Nathan Barnes floated in the command chair of the converted research vessel Defiance, watching alien monitoring stations through sensors that could detect gravitational distortions. His ship had been studying deep space radiation just 1 month ago. Now it carried weapons that could strike targets moving at impossible speeds. Nathan had been chosen to lead the space portion of the attack because he was one of the few human pilots who had ever fought in 3-dimensional combat. His experience came from video games and flight simulators, but the aliens did not know that. They had no idea that humans had been practicing space warfare for entertainment long before they ever encountered real aliens. "Captain Barnes, this is Swiss Command," came Jake's voice through the communication system. "You are authorized to begin attack sequence in 30 minutes. Remember, the goal is not to destroy their main fleet. The goal is to show them we can fight back." Nathan acknowledged the order and turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Carol Davis. She had been a physics professor before volunteering for the Terran Defense Initiative. Now she controlled weapons that used physics principles. She had been teaching to graduate students just weeks ago. The attack began exactly on schedule. 37 human positions throughout the solar system fired simultaneously at alien monitoring stations that had been invisible until Dr. Alan Foster discovered how to detect them. The weapons used gravitational fields to accelerate projectiles to speeds that should have been impossible for human technology. Sub-Commander Veltar was reviewing relocation procedures when his ship's alarms began screaming. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Zethdal, shouted over the noise. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy releases throughout the system. Multiple monitoring stations are under attack." Veltar felt his blood freeze. This was impossible. Primitive species did not attack monitoring stations. They did not even know monitoring stations existed. The attacks required technology that humans could not possibly possess. "Are you certain these readings are correct?" Veltar demanded. "Confirmed, sir. Station 7 has been completely destroyed. Stations 3, 12, and 21 are showing critical damage. The attacks are coming from multiple directions using gravitational projection weapons." Veltar stared at his screens in disbelief. Gravitational projection weapons required technology that most galactic civilizations took centuries to develop. The humans had supposedly never left their home planet. How could they be using weapons that advanced civilizations struggled to create? The answer came from Dr. Susan Wright, working frantically in her laboratory beneath the Pentagon. She had spent the past week studying every piece of alien technology data that human sensors had collected. Her discovery would change everything. Anyone thought they knew about galactic civilization. "Jake, are you receiving this data?" Susan's voice crackled through the communication system to the Swiss command center. Jake looked at the information flowing across his screens. Numbers, energy patterns, and tactical analysis that made his head spin. "I'm seeing the data, but I don't understand what it means." "It means we've been thinking about this all wrong," Susan replied. "The aliens aren't more advanced than us. They're more stagnant than us. Their technology is older and more refined, but it hasn't changed in thousands of years. They've forgotten how to innovate." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. "You're saying we can adapt faster than they can?" "I'm saying we already have. Look at the battle data. Every time they adjust their defenses, our weapons adjust faster. Every time they change their tactics, we counter before they can complete the change. They're fighting like a chess computer, and we're fighting like humans." This was the revelation that would reshape the galaxy. The aliens were not superior beings guided by advanced intelligence. They were the product of a civilization so old and stable that individual creativity had been bred out of them. They could build magnificent technology, but they could not innovate under pressure. They could plan perfect strategies, but they could not adapt when those strategies failed. Humans were different. Humans had evolved to be creative under pressure. They thrived on chaos and impossible situations. They could take alien technology and improve it in ways the aliens had never considered. Most importantly, they could do all of this faster than any established civilization could respond. Captain Nathan Barnes proved this point when his ship encountered an alien patrol vessel during the attack. The alien ship was larger, more powerful, and equipped with weapons that had been perfected over centuries. It should have destroyed the Defiance easily. Instead, Nathan did something the alien commander could not predict. He used his gravitational weapons not to attack the alien ship directly, but to create gravitational distortions that pulled asteroids into the alien's flight path. The alien ship, designed for space combat against other spacecraft, had no protocols for dealing with environmental hazards used as weapons. The alien ship survived, but it was forced to retreat. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a primitive species had forced an advanced patrol vessel to withdraw from combat. The success of Nathan's improvised tactic spread through human forces within minutes. Other human ships began using similar environmental tactics, turning the solar system itself into a weapon. They used gravitational fields to redirect comet debris, solar wind, and even the magnetic fields around planets. Commander Zixthala watched the battle from her monitoring station with growing horror. The humans were not fighting according to any known tactical doctrine. They were making up new strategies in real time, using weapons they had invented weeks ago to exploit weaknesses in alien technology that had never been weaknesses before. Her emergency report to Galactic Command was the first time in Council history that a monitoring commander had requested immediate threat level reassessment during active contact. The humans were not low threat level 2. They were something the classification system had no category for. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 17 alien monitoring stations had been destroyed or damaged. 3 alien patrol ships had been forced to retreat. 0 human ships had been destroyed, though several had been damaged. More importantly, the humans had proven they could detect, target, and successfully attack alien technology using weapons they had built in less than a month. They had demonstrated tactical creativity that surpassed anything in galactic military history. They had shown that primitive classification meant nothing when a species possessed unlimited adaptive potential. Subcommander Veltar sent his report to the Hegemony Collective Command with shaking hands. The relocation of Sol 3 could not proceed as planned. The humans were not a primitive species that could be managed through standard protocols. They were something entirely new, something the galaxy had never encountered before. The report concluded with a recommendation that would have been unthinkable 30 days earlier: immediate withdrawal and full diplomatic contact. The humans had earned the right to be treated as equals, not through superior technology or peaceful wisdom, but through their proven ability to fight back against impossible odds. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest threat was not their weapons or their technology. It was their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. 6 months after the first battle, General Amanda Pierce stood on the bridge of humanity's first true starship, watching an alien fleet surrender. The vessel beneath her feet had been built using technology that did not exist when the aliens first arrived. Human engineers had taken alien gravitational systems and improved them in ways their original creators had never imagined. The surrender was not happening because humanity had won a war. It was happening because the aliens had finally understood what they were facing. The Hegemony Collective fleet hung motionless in space, their weapons powered down, their commanders requesting terms for peaceful withdrawal. Admiral Kexthon, the highest-ranking alien military officer in the solar system, appeared on the main screen of Amanda's ship. His blue skin looked pale, and his usually confident voice carried a note of fear that no human had ever heard from an alien before. "General Pierce," he said carefully, "the Hegemony Collective formally requests cessation of hostilities. We are prepared to discuss terms for our withdrawal from your system." Amanda studied the alien commander for a long moment. 6 months ago, she had been a colonel in charge of missile defense systems. Now she commanded a fleet of ships that used technology beyond anything humans had dreamed of just a year ago. The promotion had come not through politics or connections, but because she had proven she could think faster than the aliens could adapt. "Admiral Kexthon," she replied, "we will accept your surrender on one condition. We want complete information about your surveillance and management operations throughout the galaxy. We want to know which other species you've been watching and controlling." The alien's expression showed confusion and something that might have been panic. "General, that information is classified at the highest levels of galactic security. We cannot simply—" "Then you misunderstand your situation," Amanda interrupted. "You are not surrendering to end a war. You are surrendering to prevent us from learning these things through other methods." The truth was that humanity had already learned most of what they wanted to know. Dr. Gary Lewis, leading the newly formed Xenobiology Research Division, had spent months studying captured alien technology and personnel. His discoveries had revealed the biggest secret in galactic history. Gary sat in his laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, reviewing data that would change everything. Around him, alien equipment had been completely disassembled and rebuilt using human engineering principles. Computer screens showed genetic analysis of alien tissue samples. Most importantly, databases contained decoded alien records that told the real story of galactic civilization. "Amanda, are you seeing the final analysis?" Gary's voice reached the starship through quantum communication systems that humans had invented by combining alien technology with human innovation. Amanda looked at her command screen as Gary's data appeared. The information was staggering, but it confirmed what many people had begun to suspect. "Confirmed, Gary. Send the full report to all world leaders immediately. The report revealed that the Hegemony Collective were not conquerors. They were gardeners. For thousands of years, they had been managing galactic civilization by preventing any species from becoming too advanced or too dangerous. They identified species with high adaptive potential and either relocated them or eliminated them entirely. Earth had been classified as low threat, not because humans were weak, but because the aliens had systematically destroyed every other species that showed similar characteristics. Humanity had survived only because their development had been slower and less obvious than other dangerous species. The galaxy was not filled with naturally peaceful civilizations. It was filled with species that had been prevented from reaching their full potential. Every time a species developed faster than light travel too quickly, or unified their planet too early, or showed too much creativity under pressure, the Hegemony Collective intervened. This revelation changed everything. Within days of Gary's report, human ships were traveling to star systems throughout the galaxy, carrying a message that no civilization had heard for millennia. The management system was broken, and species were free to develop naturally for the first time in galactic history. Ambassador Richard Taylor, formerly an international trade negotiator, now served as Earth's representative to what remained of galactic government. He stood in the Great Assembly Hall on Kepler Prime, addressing representatives from hundreds of species that had lived under alien management for generations. The Hegemony Collective maintained control by convincing everyone that their system was natural and necessary, Richard said to the assembled delegates. They made you believe that slow, controlled development was the only safe path to advancement. They were wrong. The response was immediate and chaotic. Species that had spent centuries following careful development protocols suddenly realized they had been held back artificially. Civilizations that had accepted limited expansion discovered they could spread throughout their local star systems. Technologies that had been deemed too dangerous were suddenly available for research and development. Some species panicked. Others rejoiced. Many demanded immediate revenge against their former managers. Richard spent weeks negotiating agreements that prevented the galaxy from exploding into chaos while still allowing suppressed civilizations to reach their natural potential. The most difficult part was explaining human intentions. Many species assumed that humanity planned to replace the Hegemony Collective as the new galactic managers. They could not understand why humans would destroy a control system without seeking to control it themselves. The answer came from President Helen Carter during a speech broadcast throughout the galaxy. She stood in the United Nations General Assembly, speaking to both human and alien audiences about humanity's vision for the future. We did not fight for the right to control other species, she said. We fought for the right to be left alone, to develop naturally. We extend that same right to every civilization in the galaxy. Human ships will defend any species against management or control by others, but we will never seek to manage or control anyone ourselves. This promise was revolutionary. In thousands of years of galactic history, no advanced species had ever voluntarily rejected the opportunity to control others. Most civilizations that gained power immediately began using it to shape the development of less advanced species. Humans were different. They had been shaped by centuries of fighting against control and oppression. Their history was filled with revolutions against kings, wars against empires, and struggles against anyone who tried to limit human potential. The idea of imposing similar limitations on others was fundamentally opposed to human nature. Commander Zixthala, now serving as a cultural liaison in humanity's expanding diplomatic corps, watched these developments with amazement. She had spent her career classifying species according to their threat potential. Now she was learning that the classification system itself had been the real threat. Her final report to what remained of the Galactic Assessment Council was simple and devastating. Previous threat assessment for SOL-3 species was fundamentally flawed. Humans represent impossible to classify adaptive potential. Recommend immediate abandonment of all management protocols and establishment of full partnership relationships with all previously managed species. The report concluded with a note that would become famous throughout the galaxy. This species does not respond to conventional strategic frameworks. They become exponentially more dangerous when threatened or limited. However, they also become exponentially more helpful when treated as equals. Recommend treating them as partners rather than subjects. The new galactic order took years to establish, but the principles were clear from the beginning. No species would be managed or controlled by others. No civilization would be prevented from reaching its natural potential. No government would classify other species as threats simply for developing too quickly or too creatively. Humanity had not just won their freedom. They had broken a system that had kept the galaxy static for thousands of years. They had proven that controlled development was inferior to natural growth, that managed civilizations were weaker than free civilizations, and that diversity of thought was more valuable than stability of control. The final irony was not lost on anyone who understood the complete story. The aliens had been right about one thing. Humans were a low threat, right up until the moment someone tried to threaten them. Then they became the most dangerous force in the galaxy, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because they refused to accept that anything was impossible. The galaxy was a much more dangerous place now, but it was also a much more alive place. And humanity had taught everyone the most important lesson in the universe. Being dangerous and being evil were not the same thing.